Alright, you said you wanted to hear the worst of it. So, don't laugh if my hands shake a little. It's late, that helps. This kind of thing doesn't like daylight, or crowds, or clinking glasses. Anyway, Michael Evans, yeah, you know that part. Detroit PD, 15 years. Wife's Eliza, our boy is 8. Marcus, the kid who wants everything to be dinosaurs and hot sauce at the same time. I cook when I can. Chef's knife therapy, I call it. Chopping onions is cheaper than counseling. This was last winter, February, when the cold turns sidewalks to bone. You remember those back-to-back storms? We were short 2 officers, thanks to the flu and some vacation time snafu. But my lieutenant still sent me to Wyoming on an extradition. Guy we'd been hunting for on a domestic case broke parole and landed in Sweetwater County overnight. I didn't mind. A drive clears my head, and I figured I'd bring back some elk meat if I could wrangle a weekend and a friend of a friend had a line on a chest freezer full of cuts. Eliza rolled her eyes and said, "Bring back my fingers with it." Marcus wanted a snow globe. I watched a lot of YouTube on the flight. Yeah, the dumb stuff. Real poltergeist caught on camera. 10 ghosts the government doesn't want you to know about. You know me, I don't buy most of it. But the night shifts make weird things normal. I like seeing the seams in hoaxes, picking apart reflections and string work. Besides, the algorithm learned I watch anything with a freeze frame of a blurry face. It fed me a string of Halloween compilations too. Porch camps with kids in capes, some creep in a plastic mask pretending to be a scarecrow. I watched not because I believed, but because it kept my mind off the idea of stepping onto a plane. The guy in Wyoming caught a break before I even landed, arranged and bonded out on some technicality. Paperwork snarl. So there I was, in Casper, with a free day, a rental Tacoma, and an incoming winter storm advisory that sounded like the weatherman was chewing glass. It felt stupid to drive anywhere. It felt stupider to sit in a hotel and hear the walls talk. I called Eliza. She said, "Be careful, Michael. Why don't you fly home tonight?" I said, "The flights are dropping like flies. I'm only going an hour and a half south to pick up that elk. Then I'll get a room and head back in the morning." She signed that marriage sign that she could already smell my truck cab marinating in jerky. I headed for the Red Desert, towards a place nobody lives on purpose. The map said Jeffrey City, but the highway sign told the truth. A few trailers, a defunct school, wind like a religion. The sky went purple early, the way it does when a blizzard is rinsing the world out of color. I've seen lake effect storms roll like grey animals over Detroit. Wyoming's got a different breed. It leaned on the truck like it wanted to shove me into a ditch and bury me there with the mule deer bones. I never made it to the meat guy. The snow closed the road between us in the time it took to sip coffee and wonder whether the crack at the edge of the windshield was new. My phone went from 3 bars to SOS, like someone had sucked the signal back through a straw. The last coherent radio call I heard on the local band was a trooper telling a plow to turn around before Powder River Pass. After that, white hiss. I turned off where an old green sign said South Pass, Historic. It was one of those brown tourist arrows that will make you drive 10 miles for a board with peeling paint. This one led to a cluster of weathered buildings tucked into a curve of the land, false fronts, a general store with hand-lettered prices for flour nobody sells, a blacksmith shop that smelled of creosote and old rain. South Pass City, or the ghost of it. The place is kept up just enough for summer brochures. In February, it felt curated by wind. The snow thickened until the world narrowed into a tunnel, and all the sound it had left was the wiper blades ticking their metronome. I decided to park on the lee side of the old mercantile, nose into the windbreak of rough plank. The truck heater had that sweet, almost burning smell. I turned it low to save fuel and listened to the storm lay its hands on the world. If I fell asleep, maybe I'd wake up to applause, yellow lights, and a grinning volunteer in a Carhartt jacket swearing the road would open by noon. That was the plan. But you know how a place feels before anything happens, like a stage with a black curtain just beginning to rise. That's how it felt. I don't get senses about things, but I've called enough domestic calls at 3 am to feel when a room has corners of silence that aren't just silence. The wind had one voice. Under it, something else cleared its throat. I only lasted 20 minutes in the cab. The cold finds your fingers through your gloves and your thoughts through your skull. The mercantile door was latched with a padlock half eaten by rust. The windows were frosted into splotches, but one panel had been replaced. New glass, a smear of tape. I didn't relish breaking into whatever counts as a museum out there, but frostbite is a crueler judge than any county commissioner. I found an outbuilding, looked like an old office, and shouldered the door till the rotten frame gave with a branch crack. Inside, a desk with mouse droppings, a tipped-over mannequin in a moth-eaten dress, and a cast-iron wood stove that seemed purely by luck to have a stack of split pine next to it. Bless whoever left it for reenactors. Bless them doubly for leaving a coffee can full of matches. I've built fires in worse stoves. The room stopped being a freezer and graduated to unpleasant walk-in refrigerator. I thawed my hands over the stovetop and felt the ache return. Pins and needles sewing my skin back on. Then I heard it. Knock, knock. Not the wind. The wind doesn't respect cadence. This was a polite rapping on a door, 3 rooms away. I stepped back from the stove, listening. The sound came again. Knock, knock, knock. You know how kids do it when they're not sure if you heard? Hesitant, hopeful. My brain served an image from the last YouTube video I watched before landing. A doorbell cam catching a kid in a sheet with eye holes, giggling at his own spookiness. Trick or treat, he'd whispered, too shy to say it loud. Hello, I called, because that's what the part of you that's still fit for neighbors does. Ranger, anybody stuck here? Wind hissed in all the cracks of the old building, but under it, footsteps, soft, not boots. The hairs on my forearms stood up as if someone had blown across them. I pulled my duty flashlight and the Glock. Not that I thought I'd need a firearm for trick-or-treaters, but the night makes you dumb and cautious in the same breath. I moved through the first room, display shelves, a dust-clogged cash register, the sour smell of a mouse. The second room was deeper and colder. A wax figure of a woman in pioneer dress slumped in a corner, the plaque at her feet telling a story of a miner's wife awaiting her beloved's return, 1872. Somebody had given her a painted pumpkin mask instead of a face. orange with a candle, slit mouth and triangle eyes, like a bad seasonal exhibit no one took down in November. It was probably cute in October with school kids and hot cocoa. In February, in a blizzard, in the dark, it wasn't cute. The knocking came from beyond that room, at a back door warped enough to show a bright wedge of snowlight along the jamb. I crept up listening. It came again. Knock, knock. And then a whisper. Right at the crack, the sound curling through like a fog. Trick or what I didn't hear, because I said, "Who's there?" in my best not scaring a homeless person voice, and the whisper skittered away like a spider. I opened the door into a blade of night. Snow cut it diagonally. My flashlight threw a tight cone over hard-packed drifts. No footprints, but about 2 feet from the threshold, someone had placed something on the sill. A little paper sack, grease-stained, folded twice at the top. It looked so absurdly normal on that rotted wood in this dead building that my mind fought it, the way your eyes refuse to register a deer in the road until your bumper kissed it. I used the flashlight to pin it and leaned out. The wind slapped the heat out of me. I grabbed the bag and slammed the door back against the weather-warped frame. I locked it, because that is what you do against wind and whatever else. The bag was damp, cool, like it had been held in hands that were very, very cold. Inside, taffy, the old school kind with wax paper twisted at the ends, stamped with a witch silhouette and Happy Halloween in a font nobody uses anymore. I stared at it like it would bloom fangs. Then I laughed. It found me, even here, the dumb pranks. I pictured some ranger with a sense of humor, a stash box for school tours. I was going to throw it back outside with a ha ha, and then I saw the bottom of the bag. It wasn't flat. Something heavy had sagged the paper into a round stamp. I turned it on my palm and a little brass coin dropped into my other hand with a ring like a bite to bone. It was an old mining token, good for 10 cents in trade on one side, carries a mine on the other. The brass had gone green in spots and smelled like old pennies and rainwater. Cute, I said to no one, and then, because all the YouTube garbage had been fermenting in my head, I thought, offerings, gifts. First one is free. You take it, you agree to something. I put the coin on the desk. I left the candy on the chair. I told myself it was for the Dawsons. I went back to the stove and held my hands over it and tried to let the fire work its animal dumb magic. Heat, breathe, repeat. The next knock came from the front door. A little faster now. Knock, knock, knock. Same cadence, like a kid getting impatient. I stood, the chair legs rasping across rough boards. The mannequin in the pumpkin mask seemed to watch me, because light is a liar and wants you to see faces. My flashlight cut through the rooms again, and this time the beam trembled. I don't mind telling you that. You can be brave with men and still be useless in the face of a voice that knows your childhood. Trick-or? The whisper teased as I lifted the bar on the front door. I flung it open, angry, expecting some teenager in a black hoodie to get the talking to of his life. Same slice of white night. This time there were footsteps. Bare. They were a child's, but they were wrong. Each print was a shallow oval, too smooth. No toes, no tread. They went from the middle of the porch boards to the top step, then vanished into the storm like breath. I shone the light down at the beam caromed off, a shape on the top step, another bag, this one heavier. When I picked it up, the bag tore and a glass bead spilled into my palm, a blue evil eye charm on a frayed string. There were more in the bag, charms, slate, marbles, a folded paper doll with its arms linked to imaginary friends. I didn't take those inside. I set them back on the step. Whatever game this was, I wasn't playing. I am not above superstition in strange houses. You ever felt someone circling you when you couldn't see them? Cops feel it in stairwells. You know they're above you, 2 floors up. Your skin knows it. The next hour or 5 minutes, it felt like time had taken off its watch. Was that stairwell feeling stretched though? The footsteps came around the building, light, not in the snow, but along the boards, along the walls, scratching near a window. The hiss of a breath, the soft thud of what? A cloth sack? A candle being set down, once very close to my ear, on the other side of a plank wall. Trick or treat, a child sing-song, pitched wrong like someone who'd learned English from wax cylinders. At some point I started talking. That's a thing they don't put in training. You talk because you're afraid of silence swallowing you. Hey kid, you picked the wrong night. I've got a gun. The wind laughed for whoever was out there. To keep from shooting the wall out of nerves, I set the Glock on the desk and reached for the thing that makes me feel more like myself. The cast iron skillet someone had left beside the stove. It was clean, oiled. The handle fit my palm like the neck of a hammer. I held it and my heart stopped trying to claw out of me. I could do something with the skillet. You can cook or you can defend. It's a tool that tells the body what to be. I layered more logs into the stove. The metal pinged and groaned like an old ship as it heated. I stood by the stovepipe with the skillet and the flashlight and breathed fog into the cold room and listened to the circling get wider and wider until it was going around the whole building. Around the whole block of buildings. I pictured it. From the mercantile to the office to the blacksmith and back. A loop. It was like the thing outside was walking the perimeter, slowly, each step a notch on a clock. It would stop by a window and whisper, or drag a nail along the sill, or set down something that made no sense. A button, a brass token, a string of beads. And then move on, never leaving prints that lasted more than a blink, because the snow was eating the world and whatever walked wasn't heavy enough for it. There are rules, right? Not laws you can cite. Rules your gut hands you because our backs knew how to face the dark long before our brains invented glass. Don't open doors, don't accept gifts, don't speak your name, don't break the circle. That last one crafted itself into my spine like a nail. Don't break the circle. I found a bag of coarse rolled salt beside the door. Some summer ranger's idea of being prepared when the stoops ice over. You know what the YouTube videos say? Salt lines. Laugh all you want. Me? I poured that bag into a ring around the stove, then another ring along the inside threshold of the front and the back doors, and then I scattered what was left beneath the window sills. I felt like an idiot until the moment my hand stopped, mid-pour, and a whisper came up from the seam in the floorboards. Hungry. Just like that. Not a moan, not a hiss. A word a child would use when they are past tantrum and into apology. Hungry. And for a second I believed there was a kid out there, lost in a blizzard, bare feet going numb. So I almost broke the rule that grafted itself into my spine. I went to the stove. I put the skillet down and grabbed my pack. I always travel with food, a habit from stakeouts. I had a vacuum-sealed bag of jerky, some almonds, a chocolate bar I'd promised myself at the end of the drive. I stared at them like a miser and then thought of a child's lips turning blue in this night. I walked to the front door and put the treats in a heap just outside the salt line. "You can have that," I said, "but you don't come in." My breath smoked like a warning flare. The footsteps came back, quick, no circling now. They stopped at the top step, pause, then a little sound like chewing but dry and empty. The jerky bag wrinkled, the almonds, no sound, the chocolate, a sound too loud for something with no fingers. I keep telling myself that's how my memory drapes it in dread, but I can still hear the crinkle. When the chewing stopped, the whisper at the crack in the jam came back and threaded itself through the line of salt with courage that felt like hunger grown brave. More. I shut the door in its face. Not hard. I wanted to. I shut it the way you shut a door on a child's hand by accident, and you know you might have hurt them. That mixture of regret and self-preservation. The next hour, it might have been 3, was circling and knocking and tapping and the soft intent of something learning my rhythms. I paced the room and answered nothing. The mannequin pumpkin face stared and stared. I started hating it, the way you hate something that is already a stand-in for the wrong idea. At some point, somebody else found me. The door moaned open under a human hand and a human curse. Jesus wept, and the breath of new cold. I spun with the skillet and the flashlight in a glare. The light hit a bearded face, rimed with frost, a wool cap furred white, eyes that had decided to give up on blinking. "Don't hit me with Grandma's pan," the newcomer said, holding up both hands. He had a sheepskin jacket and a badge I recognized after a second. "Wyoming Game and Fish." "Casey," he said, "saw your tire tracks and then the world swallowed the road. You alone?" "Evans," I said, and lowered the skillet and then, like an idiot, said, "There's a kid out there." He looked at the floor, the salt line. He sniffed the air, the wind, the mouse, the crowset, the candy. He put the back of his glove on the door seam like a doctor taking a fever. "There's something out there," he allowed. "It's not a kid." "I know that," I said, though I hadn't known it until he said it. He closed the door carefully and set the bar. "We don't stay," he said. "We can't keep heat in here long enough. My truck's stuck 2 buildings over and I got a woman in there I don't know, name of June, who pulled in behind me because I pulled in here. I told her to sit tight. You ever done a thing at South Pass at night during a blizzard? No. Then you don't want your first time to be now." He pulled the collar of his coat down and breathed like a man coming off out a pond. "You heard it knocking? And whispering. And circling." I nodded. "Then it's not trick-or-treating. That's for the living. It's walking the old route. We need to get to the office by the blacksmith. It's newer. Tight windows, wood stove that holds heat, 2 rooms, easier to defend. You armed?" I gestured at the Glock. He nodded like that was less use than the skillet. "Keep that for you," he said softly. "It won't help against what walks. but the sound it makes when you shoot can give you a heartbeat to run on. What is it? A story, he said. Not mine to tell right now. Something in his face said he'd been the kid once, standing in a doorway and listening to the old songs through wood. We went. Don't tell Eliza. Don't tell my lieutenant. We stepped out into a storm a sane man would have let kill him inside, by degrees instead. We followed the lee of the buildings, our lights putting tunnels in the night for our boots to follow. It didn't take the thing outside long to find us. The circling tightened, and the wind carried a voice around us that wasn't wind. Hungry, it said again, and then, like it had learned how to ask without spooking its dinner, trick or treat. It kept to our left, then our right, then behind us. Casey muttered under his breath, not prayers, not quite. Something with the shape of a word, worn smooth. He carried a pry bar in one hand, iron and a bundle of sage in the other, like we were hopping from Halloween to some other holiday entirely. He dropped pinches of salt like he'd trained to sew holes in a map. I carried the skillet and the flashlight and felt the gun at my back and realized I was saving the bullet for me if it came to that. That though made me set my jaw so hard my teeth clicked. We made the office 2 buildings down, a windowless shed with a narrow door that still kept the wind out, like it believed that was its only job. Inside, a woman in a red parka rubbing her hands together and cussing at the stove like it was an old boyfriend. She was middle-aged, hair in a braid, lipstick half smeared. "June," she said, like a challenge. "You his boss?" "Evans?" I said. "No one's boss. You okay?" "Not fond of ghosts," she said flatly. "If you're one, get it over with." "We should be good here," Casey said. "For a few hours, maybe till dawn. The plows will come when the wind dies." June made a sound that meant plows had better be more reliable than men. I liked her immediately. The place did hold heat, the stove was a cast iron belly, and the floor was newer. It would stand up to the circling. We settled in with that tension of people who didn't think they'd survive together, but were going to try anyway. Casey showed me the sage. "It's from a guy up on the res," he said. "Not the tourist bundle, the real thing. It's not gasoline for ghosts like folks on the internet think. It's for us. Helps us remember our edges." He set the pry bar by the door and drew a tight salt crescent across the threshold. "Don't break that unless I tell you." June unslung a short shotgun from a nylon case and offered me a look that said, "City boy," without saying it. "It's for coyotes," she said. "But I figure I'm not the only thing that flinches at loud noises." "You'll want to save it," Casey said again, with that same softness that made the hair on the back of my neck feel like it was being combed. "It doesn't feed on lead." "What does it feed on?" I asked. "Old promises," he said, as if to say, "Halloween, children on porches, lights in the dark, and hunger," he added. "That's an honest thing winter keeps in jars." I wanted a plan, the way we talk in debriefs, phase 1, phase 2. Instead, we drank for a thermos, coffee gone copper, tasting and tin, and took turns sitting by the stove and listening. The circling started again outside within 10 minutes, this time with intent that felt eager. It had found the new ring. It would walk it, test it, learn its weakness. That was my cop brain. Everything tests the fence. "Tell me the story," I said finally. because anything was better than counting my own heartbeats. Your story, the place's story. I need the thing to have a shape. Fine, he said. When the mine was running, they put on a Halloween do every year with paper lanterns and a parade for the kids. Even when winter came early, they did it. One year, it doesn't matter which, some mothers let their kids go around just a little too far. A storm blew in, fast like this. You can lose a boy in 3 minutes if you blink the wrong way and the wind moves the drifts. They found 2 girls and a boy the next morning, fingers black, faces, I won't say. After that, folks stopped the parade. But some things keep walking where they were walked to death. You know how your feet go to work even when you change jobs? This place kept October in its bones. Over the years, the living forgot to leave a light. The dead didn't forget to ask, trick or treat. He looked at me. What did you do when it asked you? I gave it food, I said, and hated the shame that ran across my tongue with the words. I thought it was a kid, starving. He nodded, not unkind. It's not the worst sin, he said. The worst is letting it in. The worst is saying its name back to it. The worst is letting it say yours. As if in answer, the whisper came bent around the corner of a wall, close to the floor, like a child flopped on a rug. Michael, it said, in a voice that had clearly learned how to sound like somebody's mother. Michael. June's eyes cut to me. That you? No, I croaked. Casey stuck his forearm in front of my chest so fast I couldn't have moved if I wanted. Don't speak to it, he said, low. It guesses, it learns, it circles. The circling got faster. No footsteps now, just the sense of orbit, like we were in a cheap carnival ride and the operator had a mean streak. The stove pinged and settled and the room got warmer in that way that makes your skin itch because outside wants you naked and dead. I realized with a surge of panic that felt like the time I almost drowned as a kid, that warmth was dangerous too. You get loose, you laugh, you open a door. Michael, the voice sang, lifting, then hungry, then with little kid delight, skillet, because it had learned a new word from my head. I gripped the handle until it bit my palm. Iron has a way of reminding you that you are attached to a world that weighs something. You can't come in, I said before I could stop myself, and Casey snapped his fingers like he'd break them. Don't, he said. It's not death. It's lonely. I know lonely things that turn mean, June said. Married one. She settled the shotgun against her thigh and stared at the door, like she could outwait winter by loading shells with patience. Maybe an hour passed, maybe 2. The stove burned low. We had enough wood to keep it talking until dawn, if dawn came. I watched what felt like the outline of us change in the air. We became 3 shapes that cast shadows the wrong way. The thing outside, call it a ghost, call it leftover October, call it a lesson we should have learned and didn't. It kept circling. At some point the knocking started again, sometimes gentle, sometimes hard enough to shake frost off the eaves. Trick or treat, it said more often, like a very patient kid who hasn't been told the rules yet, and who thinks, if it can, just say the script right the candy will roll out of the door. Dawn is an idea long before it's light. You can feel it as a loosening in your fists. The wind didn't stop, but it changed pitch. The circling slowed. That's when the real test came. Because predators, human, animal, whatever, that's when they try the handle, when you remove exactly one grain of fear and the hinge squeaks. The whisper pressed against the jamb so close that the wood dampened. Trick or treat, it said, on a long sigh, like a last breath out of a lung. Then lower, cold. I cried. I didn't want to. My eyes betrayed me, because I saw our boy in those words, and the coats that are never zipped, and the tantrum that melts into tears when your kid is too tired to hold himself together, and the world is cruel enough to expect him to. I took the skillet to the door as if it were a shield. Casey made that finger snap again, frowning, but he didn't stop me. Maybe he saw that sometimes a man has to look at the thing that wants his name. I cracked the door an inch. An inch is nothing until it is everything. Cold kissed my knuckles and salted my tears. Outside the salt crescent, two little paper sacks sat on the step like offerings, left the wrong way around. One held a bundle of dried sage, tied not with thread but with hair. The other, heavier one, slumped like wet laundry. I knew if I reached for it, I would take it into my hands, and into my house and into my life. I knew that the first shut door and the first ring of salt and the first hour of not answering would unravel like knitting dropped into dog teeth. Not tonight, I said, and drew the skillet's lip across the threshold like an iron pen scratching a line. Not ever. My voice sounded like a stranger's, like the man who comes out when your back is to a wall and there's a child in the room and the home invasion is not a man. The wind took a break from bullying to listen. The whisper exhaled, and then, like a delighted child who mistook a firm no for a game, treat. The heavier bag moved. It slumped then. Writ it. No, not writ it. That's my memory trying to turn it into a thing I can fight. It was settling. Something inside it. Weight, memory, coin. Found the bottom. It made a sound like a head finding a pillow. That was worse than writing. Because how do you fight tenderness? June stood and came to my side and put one gloved hand on the door, as if she'd lived through this before and was bound to do it right this time. Not yours, she said to the bag. Not ours. To me, close it, officer. I closed it. And then Casey did something I've never seen and can't explain. He took the pry bar and knocked once on the door, polite, like a child. He said in a voice that didn't belong to the room, "Halloween's over." That's it. That's what he said. Not a banishment, not a Latin peal. He said what the mothers used to say when the last porch light went dark and the pillowcases were fat with sugar. Halloween's over. And he took a match and lit the sage and let it ride its slow gray into the warm air, and we stood breathing that like three people pretending we believed in anything but the dawn. The circling slowed, the knocking stopped, the wind kept on, offended that we weren't paying in full attention. Sometime after that the plow came. You could tell a plow by the way it makes the world less impossible, with one long metallic sigh. June slung the shotgun. Casey shouldered the pry bar. We opened the door. There were no footprints. There was no bag. The heavier one had turned into something else in the night, wet. It left a stain on the step that wasn't water, greasy, old candy grease. Inside, when I looked, because, yes, I looked, I had to, was a child's paper mask, pumpkin face, triangle eyes soaked through and folded on itself, like someone had been carrying it against their chest for a long walk home that never finished. On top of it sat my brass token, good for 10 cents in trade. Take that with you, Casey said, voice clipped. Don't leave it here. It's walked enough. I didn't want to touch it. I touched it. It was warm. Don't ask me why. I put it in my pocket, like a man puts a pebble there to remind himself of something. We trudged to the plow. The driver's face was red and raw and ordinary. He handed us bottled water like they were medals. The road had become a guess they decided to make permanent with diesel and stubbornness. On the way back to Casper, I didn't speak. Casey told June where to find a diner that serves pancakes like doormats. June told me she wasn't going to ask what she'd almost seen, because naming things is not always respect. Sometimes it's a trap. I nodded like I understood. Maybe I did. Out the window the red desert rolled by. A sea frozen mid-swell. The sky was the color of the inside of a bruise. Back home, Eliza asked what the worst part of the trip was, and I said, I didn't get the meat. Then she smacked my arm with the dish towel and told me to wash my hands for dinner. And I held my boy before bed like if I squeezed just a little, he'd never slip into that place where children go when storms persuade them to be brave. I put the brass token in the bowl with those keys into and went to peel garlic for stew. But when I shook the pan to bloom the spices, the skillet's handle felt like it had that Wyoming night in it. Heavier than iron, heavy like a name. A week later, I swore I heard a knock while Eliza was at work and Marcus was at school. 2 soft raps, the kind a neighbor would make with a mittened hand, then a third, as if they'd decided to be brave. I stood in the kitchen with onion tears on my cheeks and my pulse counting up charges, and I didn't move. I didn't answer. I didn't even breathe for a second. The knob didn't turn. The wind in Detroit wears different shoes. I told myself it was the mailman's elbow against the door, by accident. The bag, the scanner. That night, YouTube tried to give me another parade of ghosts. I told the algorithm, no thanks. It learned for once. It offered me cooking videos instead. I watched a guy in a Wyoming cowboy hat make venison chili and talk about how salt isn't to banish anything, it's to make a thing taste like itself. I put my token in a drawer where we keep birthday candles and a string. I told myself I'd take it back to Wyoming in summer and drop it through the floorboards on the mercantile as if the world has a lost and found for old debts. It's late, I know. Your beer went warm 5 minutes ago. Mine too. I'll finish this and go home to my 2. My wife who sleeps sideways and the boy who kicks the covers off. You ask me if I believe in ghosts. I'll say, I believe in routes worn into the world by feet that walked them once and never got told the party's over. I believe in hunger that puts on a mask and learns any voice it has to, just to keep asking. I believe in circles you must not break, and in iron you can hold in your hand when your own name starts to sound like bait. I believe in doors and in kindness of not opening them. And if you hear a knock some Halloween years from now, knock knock, knock, and the wind is up and the sky is purple like a bruise and your porch light flickers like it forgot what it's for, you do what you want. Me? I'll set the skillet on the counter so the handle is easy to grab. I'll pour a line of salt that looks like nothing to anybody but me. I'll leave a bowl of candy on the stoop and a note that says, plain as a man can write, Halloween's over. Then I'll stand with my back to my family's door until the circling slows and the wind finds something else to bully. And in the morning, I'll cook pancakes and pretend that grease spot on the step is from bacon. That's the story. That's all the story I'm going to tell you tonight. If there is more, I'll let it circle me until it decides it's had enough and goes teach someone else what October means when winter comes too fast.